I've always liked it when people had named tanks. Pragmatic Reef comes to mind as one of my favorites. In this video, I'm going to talk about why I call my tank an average Reef, despite the fact it looks pretty good. I've had nicer tanks in the past, and we're going to look into that here. This was my setup at my old house. I had a 90-gallon garden eel tank, a 180-gallon mixed Reef, a 60 or so gallon anemone cube, which was my wife's tank, as well as a display refugium, which is the 112 tank I'm using now. I had a frag tank, quarantine tanks. When you have a basement and cheap tanks are plentiful, it's easy to get out of hand. We then decided to move 700 kilometers north to the country to a house with no basement and no reef stores anywhere nearby. The move itself was fine. We only lost one fish in the move, but what came next is what really killed us. There was a span of 6 weeks before we moved into our house and when we left our old house. We spent that time at my parents' house, and these holding tanks just couldn't hold everything for that long. My euphyllias melted. They took a lot of my prized LPS with them, along with my beautiful masked swallowtail angel. My Achilles tank hated being in that 3-foot tank, and he killed a few fish before he himself slowly faded away. It wasn't too bad at the start. The Achilles tank did kill that copperband butterfly and chase a few more fish. I had the Marine Pure block in for filtration, but it was just too long and not enough water. Here's a quick clip of the beautiful masked swallowtail angel, probably the most beautiful fish I've ever kept. The Achilles tank may be more graceful, but you don't see these guys too often. Here's a close-up of that Hedoni anemone. Had a porcelain crab and a bunch of sexy shrimp living in it. I'd love to have another carpet, but I would really only keep it in its own tank since I eat fish and they require a deep sand bed. Here's a quick clip of the garden eels. They thankfully didn't die. I gave them away before I moved since they would have been even harder to move than the regular fishing corals. I had a school of firefish in with them, and before the garden eels I had octopus, and before the octopus I had these guys. Sepia bandensis, dwarf cuttlefish. I actually hatched these guys from eggs a couple of times and they were really cool to have. Unfortunately, their lifespan is only 10 to 12 months, and they're pretty expensive to feed when they first hatch, requiring live mysis shrimp. I have lots of old footage of these guys, so I may upload some more. Everything from when they hatched and were eating live mysis shrimp to the point where they're full-grown adults like they're shown here. Cuttlefish are super cool, and I'm glad to have kept them. This is the same 90-gallon tank that I'm currently housing a lionfish and snowflake eel. While not as exotic, it's still fun to have a secondary tank with something you don't see every day. This is that same 180-gallon tank now, sitting in my backyard. If it didn't weigh 330 pounds or whatever it weighs, I would have gotten rid of it by now. I had it sitting outside before I put it in the house when I moved in because I needed to get some electrical work done where the tank is going to make sure the floor could support it. Everything was good to go. I was going to put a new overflow box on, got rid of those stupid corner overflows, and the tank cracked. It's just been moved too many times, and yeah, this is where it's going to sit until I finally take it apart and get rid of it. I do have a nice view from the backyard, but I would rather be looking at a reef tank than this, to be honest with you. Now we're going to take a look at some footage from 2009. This is that same 112-gallon tank I'm using again. I've had it since 2006. There are a few creatures from back then that are still in the tank, like one of these two naked clownfish. Or I was just starting to breed them back then, and I'm happy to say I still have one. I had lots of different wrasses. Australian corals were pretty new to the hobby back then. and as well as some hard corals and lots of zoos and pallies. The labooty wrasse is another one of my all-time favorites. This was a great fish to keep. Unfortunately now they're probably double the cost they were back then. Those grandies I still have in the tank. That chevron tang I had for about 7 years before he got stuck on something. That clam was probably 40 bucks. Back then, fish and corals were generally a lot cheaper than they are today. Here's the rainbow micromusa, which back then was still Acanthasteria. Again, Australian corals were pretty new to the hobby back then, and nobody had seen rainbow colors like this in an LPS. There's some more wrasses. The flame wrasse is a female transitioning to male. I had some hard corals too. Nothing too crazy here. You'll see my Generation 1 Vortec pump. Back then it was so cool to have a pump that the motor was outside the tank. This is a $600 power head, which is long since dead. I think the new ones are built a little bit better, but I'm okay with the cheaper power heads. I have that blue sponge still, but I believe it's a different specimen than that one. This acro grew out pretty well. Another one that's long gone. I think I have a skeleton in my closet. I did just add a bird's nest frag to my tank again, so hopefully soon they'll grow out to like the colonies I'm about to show here. We're going to see the rhomboid wrasse really briefly. He was another real beautiful fish. I think he jumped. Yeah, there he goes. This purple Cestipolera back then, you could sell a little frag for $100 for whatever reason. It was super in demand, even though it grew like a weed. That's about it. I would have thought by now my tank would be a lot further ahead than it was back then, but I'm still a few years away from the dream tank display, so to speak. This is some really brief footage of my 2-gallon Pico tank, which I kept for about 6 years, and it's actually been my most successful tank. If I can find some more old videos, I'll post some of that too. I actually got chalices to encrust up the acrylic in the tank, and one of them is still in my display tank now. This is a little footage of one of the 2 Octopus briaris I've kept in the past. Much like the cuttlefish, they only live about a year, but they make great pets, and I'm really glad I've kept them in the past. I have lots of old footage. I can upload some more of it if anyone wants to see it. Hopefully I can improve a bit in video making. I need to get a little bit more practice editing and purchase a proper microphone, but I'm having fun making these videos, and I have lots of old footage that I can upload here as well. I could have made this video even longer, but another downside to country living is I have limited bandwidth. I hope you enjoyed the video, and happy reefing.